So, yeah, so I was listening to Ivan's podcast and then listening to you talk about your work with the indigenous peoples and the I would say one of the things that I'm thinking when Pat McCabe,
Yeah.
so I don't know if you know Pat McCabe.
I do. I mean, I listen to those podcasts, and I've followed some of her work elsewhere too. So yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty...
So when I did the Earth Love Festival, which was 2 year, we had it 2 years in a row.
That's the one that Richard drove down to.
Yeah, the one Richard drove down to. Yeah. Pat was at both of those, and one of the things that she talked about was that it was a vision that she had. She had been studying the covens in. She went over to Europe and was meeting with a lot of the women in the covens to better understand the witch hunts and how that played out in Europe. And as that was happening, this is my retelling, so so I could get something wrong, but how it hit me as she was understanding better the witch hunt, she started to feel this, the anger growing inside of her, and her guide said, "Your anger is misplaced," basically, and that pissed her off, because she's like, "How, like, what do you mean my anger is misplaced?" And at the same time, she had a deep reverence and trust for her guides and the wisdom that they bring to her. So she knew that there was some work to do. And then she had this vision of being in the village of her ancestors as the U.S. cavalry came riding down the hill towards her village to kill everyone. And she looked in their face, and I forget what she said she saw. It was I think she described it as like passionless destruction. Like these were faces of men that were reacting from a place of deep trauma. And one of the things that I feel deeply is, the wisdom allotted to the indigenous peoples of the Americas was largely based on their sense of place, their relationship with nature, their understanding of something larger than themselves and their place in that order. And in that space, they had deep wisdom allotted to them. And, I can only trace my ancestry back so far.
Yeah.
I have a sense of place, but it's not passed on to me from my grandfather and my grandfather's father. And it's a relatively young and immature sense of place, quite limited. And yet I know that the experiences that I've had, especially in the Susquehanna, have been life-changing. And so I can only imagine what it would be if the picture, if my understanding of this region had greater depth to it,
it went back those hundreds of generations or whatever.
Yeah. And so I think that it comes back to me, the idea that hurt people, and we're a whole bunch of hurt people without a sense of place and without a relationship with the divine found within that place, and we're cut off in so many ways. As soon as I said that, I thought of circumcision just being an example of that, this cutting off of that most sensuous and sensitive part of us.
Totally, which is interesting because that was actually learning about circumcision and that whole history of it, which sounds like you probably know some of it. Like I did a deep dive into that topic, and that was one of my early entries into men's work. And men just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why don't we talk about this more? What is this trauma that's been inflicted on men that we're acting out? And absolutely, talk about controversial and taboo that no one really wants to talk about. But this whole idea, like someone said, it's like, they're talking about male violence and male sexual violence against women and other men, and just saying that how are you going to teach a young man to respect the bodies of others when his first sexual experience was being strapped down and having the most sensitive part of his penis cut off? Like
Right.
that's an embodied lesson. Even George Carlin said something like that. He said, like, I survived circumcision, which is designed to remind you as early as possible that your body is not your own.
Mhm.
And you know, there's a way to frame that, you know, in some of the religious traditions in Judaism and I think Islam as well, that practice circumcision, that it actually is designed to do exactly that. And in some of the tribal initiatory context too, it's like, yeah, your body is subservient to God, or it's subservient to the community. And like, in a weird way, there could be a kind of beauty in that. I like to think there's a lot better ways to teach that lesson. But this message that you don't have even the most basic power to choose the circumstance of your own life, and how that reverberates into powerlessness and leads to trying to claim that outer throne over other people. I think, I mean, yeah, that's a conversation that I would love to dive deeper into. It's so fascinating that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting too that you're talking about, you know, religions that utilize circumcision for specifically that purpose, to recognize that we're subservient to something greater than ourselves. And here it's just it's a ritual that traumatizes us, and then there's no follow through.
There's nothing
You know,
redeeming about it. Yeah, it's a dead
right.
it's a dead ritual.
Right.
We're not
It's
like, we're taking this and we're giving you this other thing. It's like, we're taking this, we don't even really know why. The science says whatever.
right. Or Western medicine says,
yeah,
or culture says.
totally.
Right.
And I mean, the whole
Right.
history of it was about like punishing and preventing masturbation. That was actually, like, literally, if you read medical journals from 150 years ago, they actually say that. They see masturbation as the cause of sickness, and they say, hey, look, listen, you catch a boy masturbating, do this. And and they weren't shy about it. That was advertised as the reason, and now we've kind of hidden that. Anyway, I could go on and on. I haven't thought about this stuff a lot in a few years, but I did a whole, like, a 40-page presentation about it. I went to this ethics conference and presented about this stuff. Like, yeah, man.
Yeah.
Huh.
No, I was thinking too about how circumcision is the cause of such a violent pornography industry. You know,
Totally.
like our idea of sex or hardcore sex is like
Totally.
right. And the whole reason that it's like that is that we're looking for that sensitivity. We're looking for that feeling that was removed from us, and so there's a
Yes.
numbness. And you know, a lot of the work on Reclaim is reconnecting our heart and our cock, and you know, just recognizing how cut off we are from that
Yeah.
part of our body, from our ability to penetrate and
Totally.
fully feel the
Yes.
penetration.
In a
And
sensitive and forceful way. And it's like, take away the sensitive, now all you have left is the force.
if it's the force, right? And that's to me, that's like the disconnect between our heart and our cock. You know, our warrior and lover energies. You know, there's
Totally.
there's a total disconnect. And I tend to see things through a lens of magic. I don't really see things haphazard. I would say that the idea that circumcision exists without the understanding of being in service to something larger than ourselves is very purposeful. You know, like it
The
leaves
unconscious lesson of the ritual, that
right,
the transmission that comes with that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah. That would be an interesting discussion at some
Yeah,
point.
that feels like a podcast or something on its own.
Right.
There's so many threads there.
Right.
But like, yeah, the more general point of this, like coming back to Pat McCabe and how we don't, and one thing that I remember her saying is that we don't even have the language or even the conceptual framework to understand some of this stuff, whether it is like actual, like colonization and genocide and how we relate to the teachings of Turtle Island as people whose roots are not here, how we relate to that. Like we almost can't. On one hand, you have that kind of acquisitive, I'll just take it. And on the other hand, you have this, no, it's someone else's property. You can't touch it, but it's not property at all. That itself is that imported concept that it's owned and you can't use it because it belongs to someone else. And it's not meant to be like that, but we don't have the conceptual framework for that. And she said the same thing about men and women, that this idea of, I remember she was talking about, in some of the traditions where, only the men use this type of drum and the women sit in a special hut when they're menstruating. And we just see that as discrimination. It's unequal. It's not, and that this idea that men and women are so afraid of each other's power that the main response is like, well, I'm going to make you less powerful because I'm afraid of that. And certainly in a lot of ways over the last, however long you want to say, a couple thousand years, like men have had the upper hand in a lot of ways of suppressing women's power. But that's not the only way it could be, or the only way it can easily go the other way too, I think. But that really, outside of that paradigm, there's a way where we're all more powerful and no one has to be afraid. And that I feel is the work that we're doing, the work that we're building. And I certainly feel like in my life, with me having done Reclaim and gone through other work, I'm more powerful, and that enhances my wife's life, my family's life. That is not something that takes away in any way. And she knows that in a lived way now. A lot of women don't know that. A lot of men don't know that and are scared of their own power.
Right. Yeah. I want to go back to what you were talking about with the idea of the red tent or the menstruation or the moon cycle.
Right. Yeah.
With Pat, and one of the things that she had said that was because we had an experience like that where there came a point in time where we were doing something and the women who were in their moon cycle weren't with us, and there was some grumbling amongst the men and the women about they're not unclean or what.
Right.
And she was like, it has nothing to do with that. In fact, it's the inverse. And this is and what she said is that everything has an equal not an equal finite a static amount of energy. If you put energy into something, it's got to give energy off, right? Like, right. So everything has its amount of energy, and when women are bleeding the seed of life into the earth has no option but to put energy back out, and it comes in the form of deep wisdom. And if we don't take advantage of that time when women are so connected to the earth and that wisdom, then we're losing a whole instruction manual for
totally.
the men. Like we build things. She used the example of her ancestors. There was a story, and I don't know if it was her grandmother or great grandmother or something, but in that time in that village, it was in the wintertime and they couldn't find the bison, and people were getting hungry, and starvation was a thing, and the women went into ceremony and bled and came out and said, this is what I saw in my vision. I saw the bison and these mountains, and one of the men said, I've heard of those mountains from my grandfather. I know where we need to go. And the whole village up and moved based on her vision and his direction, and they came to where the bison were, and the people were fed. And I think that's, like Charles Eisenstein said in his latest podcast I was listening to, he's talking about like every fucking system that we are accustomed to is inverted. It's and Ivan talks about it too.
Yeah, the great inversion or whatever.
Yeah, this inversion of truth, and so and I saw it firsthand with the Occupy movement. I saw it firsthand at Standing Rock. When the protesters were out on the bridge and they opened up the water cannons because some of the protesters were throwing things at the security. I can't even call them security. Whatever they were.
Whatever. Yeah.
Enforcement. Yeah. And one of my brothers was on the bridge. We got out. My son and I got out there the day after, but one of my brothers was on the bridge, and they were looking around at the protesters throwing rocks, and nobody knew them, right? So it's like
Right.
they
Provocateurs, right?
exactly, and so
Absolutely.
that's just a picture of all these ways that
Yeah,
really good intentions, really good movements get 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 co-opted and spun back around.
totally.
And the same with our relationship with our own power, the same with our relationship with the deep wisdom of women. um
Yeah.
it's the typical male joke of like, I don't need to stop and ask for directions, when his wife says, I think we're lost, for the 10th time. And yeah, so anyway, there's, yeah, I'm the unraveling of the inversion of truth is such a challenging and potentially painful thing.
Yeah.
But it can also be like, I'm reminded of Ram Dass, and like, we're all just walking each other home, and I think you froze, but
Yeah,
maybe
I
did
missed.
I lose you?
No, I'm here. I just stopped my video because you got garbled. You started saying, "I'm reminded of," who are you saying? Ram Dass?
Oh, Ram Dass, when he
Yeah.
says we're
Okay.
all just walking each other home. If we can have
Mm,
some
wow.
grace and compassion and even humor in the fact that, yeah,
Man.
everything that we've been everything that we've been taught, everything that we know, everything that is coming from this government, from this culture, from Hollywood, from our schools, just about from our churches, just about
Yeah.
everything that we believe to be true is actually the inversion of
Fucking
truth.
ass backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we can just hold each other's hand as we unravel that, I think we've got a chance.
Yeah. I mean, I just. I mean, yeah. I mean, what a different metaphor than some of these battle metaphors and war metaphors. And I don't think it's bad, those metaphors, but I really feel a difference in my system when you talk. We're all just walking each other home, and we can just, if we can hold each other's hands while this unravel, it's just like, wow. Like, I kind of feel like the image that came to my mind is, instead of us, everything's burning down, we have to run into the burning building and save it, and we're half of us are going to get burned to death, but it's a glorious fight. It's just like, we all just leave the building, sit on the ground and hold hands and watch it burn. We don't have to
Yeah,
be in there. The world isn't burning, just this building. Just get out.
right.
And like, just how different a response that provokes in me, and how different that a response that might provoke in society, from this like hyper activated, traumatized, whatever, the left, the right, the whoever, like, I've been thinking about this lately, for a couple of years. It was like, oh, the problem is Trump, and it's all the Trumpers, and it's the alt-right, and they're the problem, and they kind of came out of nowhere and fucked everything up. And it's just, that's such a dumb story, because there's a lot more going on there. But what I've noticed I'm hearing now is, I don't know if this is controversial in some of these circles, but on the other side, it's like, oh, the problem is the woke people. The woke people came out of nowhere with their stupid ideas, and they're fucking everything up. And it's like, it's more like, yeah, like, yes, it's, on one hand it's true, and on the other hand, if you just think that the problem is that in the last 2 years everyone went woke and that's the source of the problems, like, you got to go a lot deeper than that, and you got to look at some of the, just the roots of some of this stuff, the deeper roots of
Right.
all of it. And yeah, to get out of this reactive place. And it's not easy. I mean, I'm just speaking now, I'm reactive, right? And so easy to get reactive, but like, if we're all just walking each other home, then like, we know how to get there. And probably the closer we get, the more we start to oh, I recognize that house, I've been by here before, I think it's down here. And we can just kind of orient, like, really gently. And that really feels, yeah, I don't feel like I quite know how to do that, but I want to journey that way.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's what I see this work being. That
Mm.
that opportunity for clarity and solidity in our footing, as we
Mm-hmm.
recognize that the things that we've been taught aren't only not true, but maybe the inversion of truth. and
Yeah.
and you know, and seeking clarity and seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah,
That feels really, really righteous to me.
totally.